Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari is facing criticism for embarking on a 2-week medical trip to the UK, even as doctors back here in Nigeria prepare to begin a national strike. Amaka Ode tells us more.
Since taking office in 2015, President Muhammadu Buhari has gone on about half a dozen medical trips to the United Kingdom. His first was in February 2016, when he spent 6 days outside the country. Since then, the United Kingdom has been a destination of choice for the president. That's despite a ban on foreign medical tourism for public servants. The latest trip comes at a time when resident doctors across the country are threatening to down tools on Thursday. They say they haven't been paid their salaries, allowances for months.
It's a shame that the number one citizen of this country has to travel for checkup or treatment in UK, when we have abundant specialists in this country, because Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors are planning to embark on industrial strike full-blown by April 1st, 8 a.m. All those money for medical tourism can be used to develop our health facilities, to pay salaries, because we have some of our members that have been owed salary for the past 3 months. Enough is enough.
The State House Clinic, which is used by the president and his family, was recently hit by a scandal. The chief medical director complained about the lack of drugs available despite a budget of more than 4 billion naira every year. Nigeria's healthcare system has suffered from a lack of funding for decades. That's despite an agreement signed in Abuja in 1992, where governments across Africa agreed to set aside at least 15% of their budget for health. In the last 10 years, Nigeria has budgeted less than 10%.
It's totally wrong for the president of Nigeria to leave this country at this critical time when the health system is going to furtherly decay. I think at this point, what the president would have done is to bring all the health stakeholders in the health sector, put them together, have a tete-a-tete with them, discuss on way forward on how to fix the healthcare system in Nigeria, rather than traveling and worsening the current ongoing situation.
It is estimated that Nigeria loses more than 400 billion naira every year because of medical tourism. That's because there is a lack of trust in the country's health system. Private and state-owned hospitals are springing up, but most Nigerians are unable to afford these facilities, leaving them at the mercy of poorly funded public hospitals.
It is quite disheartening that the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is leaving the country on the eve where the largest workforce of the Nigerian doctors are actually going on an industrial action. It goes to show that government has not paid priority to what it's supposed to actually pay priority to. It is quite disheartening that leadership has not actually come to the fore when it pertains to health. One of the reasons why the doctors are leaving in droves to Sena climbs is that there's poor remuneration, as it were, for doctors and other healthcare workers.
Nigeria has the highest maternal and infant mortality rate in the world. So, it's no surprise that politicians who travel for treatment face criticism. Health experts now want a state of emergency declared for the country's health sector. But who will put that in place when the man responsible for running the country is seeking medical attention abroad? Amaka Ode, Arise News, Abuja.
All right, another day, another talk about the medical trip to do.
I just think the timing is really unfortunate. Obviously, I imagine that President Buhari would have booked his appointments not knowing that come April 1st, resident doctors would go on strike. But this is what has happened. So it really throws into stark relief the issue that we're talking about. And just as I was saying the other day about how we treat teachers in this country and have failed to really appreciate them, even in the wake of the pandemic, it's the same for doctors. This should not be happening to doctors in Nigeria. It would have been a great boost for our medical industry, our medical field, for the president to cancel this year's jaunts abroad for a routine checkup and do it in Nigeria. There are lots of hospitals, private hospitals, that even most Nigerians cannot afford, that he could have used if it's simply a routine medical check. It would have been a really good gesture at this point, I feel. So I feel that the president missed a trick here.
Well, it's not only President Buhari that is involved in this, kind of accusation. Across Africa, African leaders having failed to develop very strong health infrastructure in their countries, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, perhaps with the exception of South Africa, are perpetually going abroad for medical checkup. When last did you hear of any, African leader in sub-Saharan Africa taking medical care? And that again is a pointer to the fact that Africa faces a major challenge. The leaders take care of themselves. They try to go overseas to get the best possible treatment, but they fail to see the connection in terms of making sure that, standard infrastructure, developed infrastructure is available within the healthcare system. And this has been one of the fallouts of the management of the COVID-19 process by many African countries. That's the first leg of it. The second leg of it is at the level of leadership by example. You will recall that sometime last year, the president had complained about medical tourism. In 2013 alone, it was reported, Nigeria spent over $1 billion on the medical tourism. One of the things President Buhari said he would do was to put an end to medical tourism. But repeatedly, he himself and members of his family go abroad for medical treatment. How about that in terms of leadership by example? How about that in terms of showing that example to rebuild confidence and trust in the healthcare system that is in Nigeria, or seeing as a priority the deepening of the quality of the healthcare system in the country? So people have raised this point. They say President Buhari has broken his own rule. He has broken his own promise with regard to that. Third point, well, we're all human beings. Every human being will try to get the best possible care. But when leaders are involved, yes, people can get emotional and raise questions. Garuba Shehu, speaking for the president, has said, however, that what we're dealing with here is not a case of medical tourism as it has been defined. What he is saying is that before now, the president had always been traveling abroad for medical checkups, and that is not when he became president for a second time that he started this tradition. So at an individual level, perhaps there are certain things that we've not been told, that the president needs some experts abroad, because Garuba Shehu also pointed out that he cannot at this minute, for populist reasons, change the consultants, the doctors who have been attending to him and who have his medical records. That's the explanation, but I'm not too sure that many Nigerians are convinced with that explanation.
Of course not.
Because at Wellington Hospital yesterday, many Nigerians who expect that he will go to Wellington Hospital went there and tried to stage a protest that the president of Nigeria should go back home. But the basic concern, really, and which is valid, is the condition of the healthcare system in Nigeria, and at a time when medical workers are protesting. However, last week, it was reported that the Minister of Health, representing the president at an event, at a telemedicine event, I think in Ogun State, had pointed out that part of the reasons for medical tourism is the unfriendly attitude of health workers in Nigeria. So is the president of Nigeria also afraid of the attitude of health workers in Nigeria? But that's a question that hangs in the air.
But can I just say that a medical checkup, routine or otherwise, is a part of medical tourism? What definition is Garuba Shehu talking about?
I just quoted him.
He's completely wrong.
All right, most importantly, that's all on news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Ruth Sudiri, Michael Wilson, Adiso Omoro, Aaron Akeja. Let's give us updates on Africa global business, COVID-19 and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Risings channel. Rotus, how are you, my friend? Good morning.
I'm good, Rufai. Good morning to you. Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. We kick off with the World Bank, the latest Africa Pulse report, where they're saying that the recovery for sub-Saharan Africa from the COVID-19 pandemic is going to be uneven. And the World Bank is saying that this is going to be uneven because of the varying levels of solutions that have been provided to address the COVID-19 pandemic. They're mainly talking about not enough African countries have the funding necessary to be able to support their budgets and get past the COVID-19 pandemic. So essentially, the sub-Saharan recovery is going to be uneven. That is what they're saying with respect to the recovery for most of these African nations. Now, for the IMF has also released a report on low-income countries, and they were talking about, this is their policy paper that also just came out as well, macroeconomic developments and prospects in low-income countries. They're saying essentially the same thing, and there's overlap when you think about the World Bank looking at African nations and the IMF looking at low-income countries. Most of those low-income countries, unfortunately, are located in Africa. One chart that they have up here looking at debt positions, they're talking about the fact that debt is an issue. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see on the chart public debt levels as a percentage of GDP and purchasing power parity weighted average. You'll see the line at the LIC fuel exporters. You can see the amount of public debt levels rising pretty high. You also got diversified economies, fragile economies, tourism-dependent economies. All of them, you can see the trajectory rising as we go from 2013 through to 2020. On the right-hand side, the evolution of risk of debt distress. The DSA is debt sustainability analysis. You'll see the legend there, low debt, moderate, high, and in debt distress. You can see that it's kind of trending downwards, but for the red bar, which is the high levels of debt distress, you can see it going from 19% in 2013 all the way to 43% in 2020. So there's issues with the different debt levels. Speaking of debt levels, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, has said that there needs to be debt relief for low-income countries. It is necessary for them to be able to get past where they are right now in being able to battle the issues that have come upon them from COVID-19. And that ties into the IMF reports. You refer to her time as finance minister under the Obasanjo regime, the Paris Club debt reduction to the tune of almost $30 billion that allowed Nigeria the breathing room to then take on economic growth after that. So she's calling for it again with respect to African nations. So Lai Mohammed, Culture and Information Minister. He was on NTA on Monday, and he says that in order to develop local content in Nigeria, any company or brand that produces an ad in an international station in another country that doesn't produce it here in Nigeria, if that ad is aired here in Nigeria, whether it is on a local or international channel, they will pay 100,000 Naira fine, and that money will go into a content development fund. There's been a lot of reaction to what he said, because he's saying it is necessary in order for us to boost content development here in the country. Many people are saying that this is going to chase brands away from airing ads in Nigeria, because you shouldn't be forcing them to put funds into a money into a content development fund by charging them 100,000 Naira per ad for ads that are not produced here in Nigeria. So in order to avoid the fine, you basically have to produce your ads here in Nigeria. The Nigerian Senate has been grilling loan requests from the Debt Management Office and the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Nanono. He's asking for $1.5 billion. He's asking for 995 million euros. The Debt Management Officer, the Director General, Patience Oniha, she's asking for $1.5 billion. They want to use those different amounts of money. One, the $1.5 billion is for state development. But the Senate, that is the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debt, said, well, no. What is the credit worthiness of the states that you're looking for in order to get this 1.5 billion? Patience Oniha, Director General of the DMO, was not able to provide it. They asked her to come back with the credit worthiness of the states. For the Minister of Agriculture, the 995 million euros that he wants to use for agricultural mechanization. They said, look, I think we want to get about 300-400 tractors from Brazil. They said, that's the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debt, said, look, you can get these tractors, but what about capacity to use them properly, to maintain them? You need to come back and prove to us that the folks, and this is an extensive article in today's This Day, the folks who are going to be, or rather farmers who are going to be operating these tractors, you have to tell us that they have the capacity to do that, because they may be laid to waste. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the Minister of Trade and Investment, Ni Adebayo, he was in Abeokuta, Ogun State capital, represented by the Director of Trade in the ministry, Aliyu Abubakar. They essentially said that the infrastructure hurdles in Nigeria could hamper the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, essentially saying that we have to address the bottlenecks in the nation in terms of infrastructure in order to allow the implementation of the AFCTA to have success. And then on medical tourism, I just saw your reports, the reports from Abuja. This day has an investigation that shows that between 2015 and 2019, Nigeria budgeted 2.5 trillion naira for the healthcare sector. The World Health Organization's threshold for the amount of the total budget is to be 9%. 59 trillion was budgeted between 2015 and 2019, so about 5.3, 5.4 trillion is what should have been budgeted for health. Even though it falls below that threshold, what have we gotten from our healthcare sector, which has led to part of the outcry to President Buhari's trip overseas for his medical checkup?
All right, Rotus, I want to start with the minister. It's quite laughable when you hear things like that. And you know, no offense to the minister. I read a lot of The Economist, and I see a lot of classified ads by the Nigerian government for people that they want to take into various roles and the likes. Truth has to be said.
Like Mohammed, right?
Yeah, should we fine the Nigerian government for putting classified ads on The Economist magazine? You see, we keep throwing the baby away with the bathwater. It's not the content funds that make us viable in terms of content. It's the enabling ecosystem and the environments we create. The Nigerian music sector that has grown today was not because we had a content fund for Nigerian musicians. It was because these musicians started working at their music, they got better over time, and they developed the sector themselves. So are you going to say that for every Nigerian song played on a Kenyan radio station, you charge them inversely? But you want Nigeria culture to grow around the world, but you want to slam other people for doing it. So the minister, please, should have a rethink as regards this. Secondly, when you look at the growth prospect of Africa, you will see how debt has destroyed us in this continent. And it is very sad that we don't even know that what debt should be used for should be able to recapitalize other sectors of the economy that will provide other viable funds to service the debt in the long run. And it's not only Nigeria having this problem. 25 to 40% debt to service ratio. Debt to GDP ratio. In Ghana now, it's close to 80%. And when you look at the infrastructure in Ghana, is it worth what they have taken about 80% of their GDP for in debt? No. I think the countries that are a little bit sensible in Africa are the ones that don't have resource. Countries like Cape Verde and countries like Mauritius that have used tourism and tax havens to be able to develop their economy. They've only been the ones that are most economically viable and sensible in their management practices. I think it's time for us to learn that we can't continue to plunder ourselves in Africa.
I want to talk about the power of inclusiveness with regards to Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Maybe a Western Director General of the WTO might be aware on an intellectual level that certain countries, lower income countries, do need debt relief, but she will feel it more keenly. That's why every voice having a seat on the table is extremely important, globally, nationally, subnationally. Even her vaccination drive, she's having an event in mid-April to talk about the shortages with vaccines and, push that agenda. Only somebody who has worn the shoes and knows where it pinches will do that. And obviously, we wish her all the best with those two initiatives because it benefits us as well. She does have experience with negotiating debt relief. The G20 has their debt service suspension initiative, which hopefully they will extend. It's obvious in the wake of the pandemic that these things cannot be sustained. It's not business as usual at the moment. So that's good.
Yes, clearly the debt suspension initiative is commendable. We've been having this conversation since about last year. In fact, since 1996, when the World Bank and the IMF came up with the HIPC initiative. And the G20, they've been talking about how to help many of these low and middle income countries that are suffering more and who represent about 2/3 of the world population and have been impacted heavily by the COVID-19 crisis. And it is believed, that the debt suspension initiative would help a lot to help these countries survive COVID-19, build infrastructure, introduce a number of social policies. Now, at the spring meeting of the World Bank, that proposal will be presented, and we'd like to see how it goes. Now, when the debate started last year, one concern was about China. China was not so enthusiastic, about this debt suspension But we hope that at the end of the day, China will also provide the necessary support. However, the thing to be concerned about is, one, are there conditions, would there be conditions attached to this debt suspension? You will recall that the World Bank is supporting about 100 countries, with a lot of money, and they listed those countries. Nigeria also approached these, institutions. So what are those conditions? And how would the leaders of these low and middle income countries, how would they manage those conditions? Because it's not, they're giving grants, they're not giving loans. That's the idea at one level. And then there will be debt suspension. But I think responsible leadership is also very important for those leaders in those poor countries to realize that they too have their own responsibilities.
All right, thank you so much for your time, Rotus, my friend. All right, moving on to a business update. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Michael, it's a pleasure talking to you, Michael.
Hi there, good morning. Global leaders globally then, a pandemic treaty arguing that the COVID-19 crisis has posed the greatest challenge to the global community since the 1940s. A joint letter from the UK, from France, Germany, but non-signatories to it include the US and China, as well as Russia. We're also going to see the implications of Joe Biden's Build Back Better program. It's starting to dawn on the financial markets. These are an overreaching issue. US yields spiked higher overnight. And then globally, again, the International Monetary Fund will upgrade its forecast for global economic growth when next week, just after Easter, and it will be higher than their original January feeling of 5.5%. That's global growth coming from them. Okay, that's a global look at what's getting the global commentators interested. As far as Asia concerned, let's have a look at the Asian overview. Shares in Asia Pacific were mixed, really. Good data once again from China. Nikkei, though, down a little, topics down a little, but mainland China stocks as well. The overall picture is, despite the fact that they're down just today, Asia and Australia both recovering quite quickly, even if those semiconductor shortages actually are being felt right at the moment. The slowdown because of the Lunar New Year and also closed borders and so on. The main risk is still geopolitical. The main risk is coming from the European Union and India, both of whose vaccine progress is falling very much behind. Mitsubishi Financial, they're the latest group in the wake of that big stock sell-off on Wall Street last night. The brokerage arm flagged potential losses around $300 million due to that the Archegos. I think you've got Mitsubishi Motors there. It is actually the financial, not the Mitsubishi Motors. Marissa Madas, Archegos Capital Management, Credit Suisse, and Nomura, two prime brokers as well. So this kind of this earthquake that happened on Wall Street, it is quite contained, but it is affecting quite a lot of companies. Xiaomi, we talked them yesterday about their new smartphone. They're apparently now going to launch an electric vehicle, invest $10 billion over the next 10 years. They think that there's a market in China for 1.9 million electrical vehicles to be sold by 2021, but this year. So it's quite big, actually. Apple now will be unveiling its new products. They normally have a kind of reveal in June. They've put a date on this, June the 7th. Last year, it'll be online because of the pandemic. But we're looking at new iPhones, new iPads, new Apple Watch, new iTV, new Mac software, and so on. It's sometimes used to new software altogether. We're just expecting updates, but we'll see. So to the United States then, staying in the United States, and the Biden Building Better package, we'll get details of that today, how it will be paid for. There's going to be a speech in Pittsburgh about that. Interspersed with that, you'll get the latest US employment release. Not the big figures, that's at the end of the week, but they should show 550,000 increase in jobs. As far as US markets are concerned, let's briefly recap those. Tech stocks fell yesterday because the Treasury yield is up. This is very important, actually. It depends what you feel about inflation, doesn't it? If you're looking at it and you look at the main drivers of big inflation, which used to be full employment, rising prices, and also a lot of liquidity around, well, there's a few bits of that. I would suggest not enough to spike massive inflation fears, but we'll see about that. Apple and Microsoft, the biggest tech losers yesterday. As far as the EU's concerned, a quick market roundup. This first quarter has been a fairly decent period for equity markets, despite the lockdowns across Europe and the UK. European markets have not been performing too badly. DAX closing at a record high yesterday, in spite of what's actually happening in Germany as far as the vaccine relies, which again is not really my purview, but I think vaccines are all important, no doubt. Your next correspondent will be talking about that in detail. UK is calling for tough action versus China. Now there's going to be a G7, a virtual meeting today, and this is a very big job for your Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, I would imagine, because the World Trade Organization is effectively emasculated by President Trump. It blocked its appointment of judges. It's to its appellate body, if you want to get technical about this kind of thing. So it needs actually to start to talk about the action it's going to take or what's going to happen about China. Big job for her and the role of the WTO as it actually happens. We're talking about London and wondering what the big IPOs are going to be. We talked about Deliveroo yesterday. Top biotech companies now announced that London, this is Oxford Nanopore, £2 billion flotation, may be coming up later in the year, but the point is it's actually chosen London rather than New York to do it. We're seeing this flip-flop, aren't we, between various financial centres which are looking good for IPOs in this kind of sector. UK as well, a group of fashion and retail have got together. We had that Eat Out to Help Out thing we were talking about earlier last year. This is Shop Out to Help Out. They're encouraging people to actually get to the high street. It would cost 50% of shoppers' costs. That's not bad, is it? So they're helping you shop, and it would apply at physical stores with fewer than 10 staff. So it's a kind of Save the High Street scheme, which is backed by the likes of the beauty entrepreneur Charlotte Tilbury and the fashion designer Henry Holland. Those names may or may not be familiar to you, but they are quite big as far as retail is concerned in the UK and Europe. The UK government now is restated. It's considering all options as far as nationalisation of Liberty Steel is concerned. And on Sunday, the government rejected a request for £170 million in financial support, but that's due to the very opaque structure of Liberty Steel, not British Steel as you're saying there, but Liberty Steel. The Gupta family, not quite sure about what to do with them and the terms of the falling finance, but it's one of those options. Whether you think that's a good idea depends whether it's profitable or not. We've dipped our toes into the nationalisation pond, and it didn't work out very well for this country. And as far as commodities are concerned, now we've got an OPEC Plus meeting tomorrow, and I suspect that there probably will be a lot of price action as far as oil's concerned there. They've been digesting the relative freedom of the Suez Canal, but they do also recognise it will take a long, long time for that to actually unwind. Falls overnight, flush some Asian buyers out. So OPEC oil sort of dipping around. I've got WTI at $63 a barrel and Brent crude at $63.95. So it's sort of it's moving around that kind of bottom end of the sweet spot for it. Gold, though, afraid not, fell ominously overnight. We're now looking at that support level of $1,700 an ounce did not last, and it's fallen now to $1,679.60 this morning. So again, until a real crisis happens, gold bugs are going to be disappointed. That's your global view.
Michael, well, OPEC Plus meeting tomorrow, April 1. Let's start with that. What should we expect? Will OPEC Plus extend the supply cuts, and will Saudi Arabia sustain its own voluntary cuts? Because it's on the basis of that we've seen oil, doing well within the last 48 hours. And then the pandemic treaty that you referred to. The U.S. and China have both been silent about it. In fact, they were not part of the leaders that signed the letter that was published. Now, Tedros Ghebreyesus, the WHO Director General, says that is not a problem. Well, what kind of pandemic treaty would that be? talking about accountability and talking about, an international pandemic architecture, that will not have the two most powerful countries in the world on the list supporting it. Do you agree that that's not a problem? And then third, Volkswagen. That joke, that prank by Volkswagen about renaming the subsidiary in the United States, Volkswagen, they called it, and now turning around and saying that it's an April 1 joke. How about that as a marketing strategy? Will it hurt the company? Will it create issues of trust, particularly from journalists who have been made after double-checking to put out an inaccurate story?
I didn't mention the Volkswagen thing because it's incredibly bad luck to talk about April Fool's jokes before April the 1st. So I think that everybody's out of kilter as far as this is concerned. That did not form my report because I don't want to bring bad luck on us all as a result of that. If there's going to be April Fool pranks, they have to take place on April the 1st and they have to happen before noon. Otherwise, they are not funny and it will bring bad luck on the perpetrators of those jokes. As far as journalists are concerned, I've been victims of April Fool's jokes in the past myself. I think most journalists have. You just have to be extremely careful. As far as the major powers getting together for some kind of global response, I think it's disappointing, actually, that the US and China are not involved in this. Remember that the World Health Organization has just finished reporting from China about where the pandemic actually started. Did it, in fact, start in Wuhan or what? Is the United States worried about the slowness of their vaccine rollout? I think that Biden's probably biding his time about that. I have no idea what's happening in China, and I'm thankful that I don't think anybody else has either. As far as the two leading economies of the world are concerned, they could do a great deal to boost this. I think there's a lot of showboating going on right now, but I am disappointed. I think there is a problem if the two major economies in the world do not address the major problem facing us, which is the pandemic. And finally, as far as OPEC's concerned, I think what they'll probably do is there'll be shouts from the touchlines saying we need to increase our oil production for more revenues. I think what Saudi will do is actually use their very, very powerful muscles to keep oil within that sweet spot that we've often talked about, between $60 and $70 a barrel. If it's within that range, quite happy. We can talk about peak oil in later programs, but right now, I think that's the job of OPEC and OPEC Plus.
Okay, Michael. Real quickly, Britain going the way of nationalization again. You remember what happened to Northern Rock? Is that going to be the case with Liberty again? Can't they just sell it over? Aren't the Metals willing to buy?
Well, as I said, nationalisation is not something that's a good idea. That was Northern Rock was a rescue, and I think you were talking about something which is very, very difficult at that stage. There was a financial crisis going on, which enveloped a load of financial companies, including Northern Rock. As far as nationalisation is concerned, that's very, very dangerous ground. As I said, we tried it in this country in the past. It did not work very well. What you find is with nationalisation, the companies tend to be run for the purposes of the staff and not the customer. That is the most important thing. If we feel we need to preserve Liberty Steel and 15,000 jobs, it will be a political decision. I think it's something that they're not closing off any options right now. Personally, I think you have to look at it very, very coldly. If it's making a profit, then fine. If it's not, then not. Do we want to, does the developed world want to be making steel anymore? That's another wider question. Does it want to be making specialized steel anymore as well? These are open questions. I don't know the answers to them, but that's what, if I were a government minister, that's what I'd be asking. I'd throw off my political clothes and say, we have to look after taxpayers' money. Is this a black hole, or is it something that we can save for success in the future? That's the decision.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for your time. Let's not all just get too emotional about steel. Quite very sad prospect for Liberty there. But for updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesuwa Moro is here. Adesuwa, great to have you.
Thank you so much, Rufai. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Dr. Abbas, and good morning, Tundu. And I totally agree with Michael Wilson on the global treaty. They are not just the only two biggest economies in the world, talking about the U.S. and China. The U.S. is also the biggest donor to the World Health Organization. So it already looks like by the time the next pandemic is here, we would also have the scramble for vaccines and life-saving products because we are not all on the table. But moving ahead, global coronavirus cases have now surpassed 128 million, with at least 2.8 million deaths. Here in Nigeria, 121 new infections and 7 deaths were recorded in 14 states in the last 24 hours. Now, the largest number of infections came in from Lagos with 40 cases. And still in Nigeria, a look at the vaccination against COVID-19 shows a further 71,374 people received their first jabs of the AstraZeneca across the country and the Federal Capital Territory, except in Kogi State yesterday. Now, that brings the total to 291 people rather in Nigeria who have received their first dose. A further breakdown shows that only Lagos State has surpassed the 100,000 mark of doses almost 3 weeks after inoculation commenced. Coming behind Lagos State are Ogun, Kaduna, and Katsina State. Abia, Taraba, and Kebbi State have the least vaccinated people, according to this MPHCDA data. Now, away from Nigeria, in an unusual public rebuke from an agency such as the WHO, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus voiced frustration with the level of access Chinese authorities gave the WHO team to investigate the origins of the coronavirus vaccine. Michael had mentioned this a moment ago. Now, at that news conference, a 20-page report was actually released, and Dr. Tedros said the laboratory leak is the least likely hypothesis, but he says all hypotheses require further investigation. Now, again, it's 120 pages, but what are we learning so far from this anticipated report? It shows that there's no firm conclusions about the origins of the novel coronavirus. It probably spread to people through animals and probably started spreading also among humans more than a month or two before it was actually detected in December 2019. So this means it's possible that coronavirus was around the world before December 2019. Also, the role of the Wuhan market is not definitive, but the origin still points to the town of Wuhan. Meanwhile, governments of the US, Canada, UK, Japan, and 10 others have expressed shared concerns about this study into the origins, and they have called for independent and fully transparent evaluations with full access to all relevant data in the future. China still claims that it is innocent and is not holding anything back. But talking about global treaty, it's all about speedy response. And leading scientists from 28 countries say the world actually has a year or less before the current COVID-19 vaccines are no longer effective. 2/3 of these 77 scientists say within 9 months, the virus would have mutated so much that the vaccines will need to be modified. And nearly all of the 77 scientists says this is because there's unequal access to inoculation, as too many countries have not been able to vaccinate their people, and the lack of coverage will only mean that the virus will adapt and change quickly, and new variants pose a threat to all countries, whether they have vaccinated or not. So let's not be penny-wise, pounds-foolish when it comes to responding to the coronavirus. And finally, this morning, Germany is again suspending routine use of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. This time around, it's saying for people aged below 60 because of a risk of rare blood clots. The German medicines regulator found 31 cases of a rare blood clot among, listen to this, nearly 2.7 million people that have received the vaccine already in Germany. Should this be a source of concern? I leave that to you guys. Meanwhile, Canada also suspended the use of the AstraZeneca jab in people under 55. The company insists that international regulators have found that its benefits outweigh the risk significantly.
Well, let's start from Nigeria. As they say, charity begins at home.
Begins at home. Mm-hmm.
And, we have received so far 3.94 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and an additional donation of 300,000 vaccine doses from the MTN. And in 3 weeks, we've just been able to do just about 600,000. Now, I think we can do better than that.
I
think that the challenge before the presidential task force and the various task forces in the states across the country is to see how, after 3 weeks, they can review what has been done and to see how people can be further mobilized to take the vaccine. In terms of penetration, I don't think that the numbers are exciting enough. However, I think we should commend the states that have been truly focused in this regard, particularly Lagos State, that has done, in the first week, about 40,000 plus. Third week now, 122,000 plus, followed by Ogun State that has done 50,000 plus. But if the list that you provided, Lagos, Ogun, Bauchi, and I think Katsina is also on that list. Just about 5 states out of 36 and the Federal Capital Territory. That doesn't look like the rollout is going on at a very good pace. And then the report also indicated that Kogi State is yet to receive, the vaccines. And we also do not have information on the cold storage facility in Kogi State. I think that as a matter of priority, in order not to exclude the people of Kogi State or to allow the conspiracy theory position of the state government to deny the people of Kogi State of their right, of their choice. Maybe the Federal Ministry of Health, the NCDC, the MPHCDA will have to look for another strategy, even if it includes going to Kogi State to help them repair that cold storage facility. Now, as for Germany, what has happened with regard to thrombosis, which is reported in about 33 persons out of about 1.7 million people who have taken the AstraZeneca vaccine in Germany. Well, you may look at that and say, well, maybe AstraZeneca and the EMA 12 days ago were right when they said, look, the cases reported do not seem to raise any anxiety because it doesn't seem to be something unusual if you look at the incidence of thrombosis within the general population. But Angela Merkel, the chancellor, says, well, that notwithstanding, it's better to be careful. But this, I guess, will also shake the confidence in that particular vaccine, which Germany had suspended before, and now they are restricting it to persons who are over 60. But the good spirit, the good faith expressed by AstraZeneca, Oxford University, that they will continue to investigate, I think that is what is more important in this particular instance. But unfortunately, in Germany, as in other European countries, the third wave has already started. The figures are going up. And yet now, in terms of the target that Germany wants to achieve, with this latest development, that meeting that target or the deadlines already announced may be a little bit difficult. Finally, if I may just comment on the China report released by the WHO. Yes. Well, there was a lot of skepticism about the independence, the access granted, those WHO international experts. And now, at the end of the day, what we're told is that if that report has achieved anything, it is simply that the conspiracy theory has been put aside, because one of the conspiracy theories was that there was a laboratory accident, and now that report says there is no laboratory accident. It says Hunan is not the epicenter, but scientists reviewing that report have said, look, we're not certain. Even with Ebola, we don't know the exact source. That's why those 4 categories that report outlines.
That's why it appears that a lot of things that have been suggested are now being confirmed, including the fact that it's likely a zoonotic disease, this COVID-19 virus. And it's unfortunate that this will continue to happen because of man's unhealthy relationship with animals. Look at those Wuhan wet markets and what happens all over the world. It's not about shaming China. We also have similar things here with people and their bushmeat and what have you. And also the hostile activities of human beings with regards to the environment. Deforestation is driving animals out from their natural habitat to, interact with us in a way that nature never intended, and we can see the consequences. There will be another pandemic, which leads me to that pandemic treaty. When that inevitable pandemic occurs, it's a shame that you have the US and China acting in this fashion. Another notable absentee being Russia. Obviously, their motives are clear. We all know the kind of nationalistic, short-sighted thinking that they're showing, but it is regrettable because this just shows that the next pandemic will happen and we will see the same botched responses. If we do not learn the lessons of history, we are doomed to repeat them. It's so unfortunate that millions of people have died and these world leaders continue to fail to grasp the point. We're supposed to be learning lessons. Otherwise, what's the point of the tragedy that befell the whole world? It's really unfortunate. As for WHO, I'm really glad to see that they're, growing some teeth here. finally, because you know their credibility was shot to pieces because of their relationship with China and the perceptions thereof. And as for this pernicious COVID-19 and the fact that because it mutates, it's a clever virus, like influenza, we're going to have to continue to, have these top-up jabs, same as influenza. But unfortunately, with the influenza jab, usually people get notices from the NHS or what have you, depending on your age and depending on your vulnerability. But with the COVID-19 vaccination, it's all of us. Every year, we're going to have to, make a note in our diaries, it appears. It's unfortunate. So sad.
Right, time for the world hope. Definitely should hold sway in times like this.